Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you and have a safe day.
Pat, are there any public speakers this morning?
Yes, I believe there are two.
Our first speaker is Jason Anthony.
Good morning, Pat. I want to speak about the incident that happened yesterday at Forest Hills, that we found, believe it or not, bed bugs in one of the towers. This could be a safety hazard for our MTA New York City Transit employees, and it could be a safety hazard for my fellow commuters. These insects are they could spread around very easily. So my recommendation is have a safety protocol when these insects appear. Do the necessary fumigation to avoid future incidents like the one that we had the other day, that a passenger was found, let's say, deceased in a D train at Columbus Circle, and to avoid incidents that happened like last night in Forest Hills. So, and another thing, the homeless population is growing by the day, and I can see them in my home station panhandling. When I go to West 4th Street, I see them panhandling. At Penn Station, believe it or not, that they oftentimes sleep in Penn Station, and we cannot even go to Penn Station anymore because we don't feel safe in Penn. And not even in Grand Central. Grand Central is the biggest terminal in New York City. We cannot even go to Grand Central anymore. So let's see what the safety committee is going to do about this and other safety matters. So I'll see you guys later on in the full board.
Thank you. Our next speaker is William Drummond.
Good morning. I think I'm going to come back later. There's a lot of the empty seats here. But I was here 6 months ago, and I spoke about assaults. And in that 6 months, has been 61 more assaults. And them assaults has been gropings. Two of our members got coffee tossed at them, hot coffee, hot chocolate, feces. And this perverse trend has to stop. And they are assaulting us. I got a caller. I don't bring notes. I got a caller today from a conductor. And her fellow conductor had been spit on. And I took the call, and she said, please, can somebody come here and help him? He's crying. He's hysterical. And I insensitively, and I'm embarrassed by that, I said, he's a grown man. And I was at 130 Livingston Street. There was another conductor I didn't know. And he said, what happened? I said, a grown man just called. He said he was spit on. They say he's crying. He said, brother, I got spit on. He said, you don't know what that's like. He said, you're sitting there marinating in someone's saliva, and you're humiliated, and you're angry, and you want to kill that person. But I can't do anything. I'm a trans employee. Now, I feel bad. I couldn't relate to that. I've never been spit on. And I've been coming here talking about assaults and spitting and all these issues regarding assault, and I couldn't relate to him. And he was very humble about it. And I'm embarrassed, and I'm profoundly sorry for my insensitivity. But y'all don't know what it feel like. If I don't know, and I work down there, y'all couldn't know. And y'all have to do something about that. They are assaulting our membership for sport. And they're doing a lot of this because we're trying to transform this system, this antiquated system. and there's delays and there's things going on, and these passengers are frustrated, but some of them are sick and demented, and you're smart people, you have to do something
Please
about that.
conclude
Thank you for your time.
remarks. Thank you. That concludes our speakers for this morning.
Thank you. Minutes for the September 25th Safety Committee meeting have been distributed to all board members and are available on the website to the public. Do I have a motion to approve them? Second. Any changes or edits? All in favor? Any opposed or abstained? Thank you. I'd ask you to take a look at the 2020 Safety Committee work plan, and I'll ask for a motion to approve it. I move it. Second. Any changes, edits to the 2020 Safety Committee work plan? All in favor? Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. Pat, I'd ask you to take us through the safety metrics and the safety risk management report.
Thank you. Will do. Okay. Good morning, commissioners, staff, guests. Today, the safety team will touch on the 2020 work plan, address the challenge of preventing suicides on MTA property, and describe upcoming board requirements regarding the approval of the federally mandated NYCT Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. We will also highlight our 2019 safety metrics, which all trended in the positive direction. Last year's improvements in safety demonstrate the significant effort by the safety offices in cooperation with the MTA's talented workforce, who continuously strive to do the right thing. Starting with the 2020 work plan, we just approved it, but just some of the highlights are on this slide. Of particular interest to the committee will be the transformation of the safety organizations across the enterprise, which of course is part of the much larger MTA transformation, so we'll talk about that later in the year. And as our norm, we will review safety metrics, and our efforts to manage risk will be discussed at all safety committee meetings during the 2020 year. Before each of the agencies report out, let me frame their discussion on suicide prevention. As the statistics on the slide depict, the impacts of suicide are significant across the nation, let alone at the MTA. Our MTA properties last year, there were 42 confirmed suicides and 29 other attempts. The emotional burden endured by the loss of these individuals is heavy on their families and friends, and particularly challenging for MTA employees and first responders who were either unwitting participants in the deaths or involved in the recovery of the remains and subsequent investigations of the incidents. Further, the financial costs stemming from the disrupted service and the manpower involved in the investigation, medical support, and recovery of the remains are heavy. Lastly, the inconvenience endured by the countless MTA customers is significant and unnecessary. While today's presentation is focused on suicide prevention, there are many other trespassing incidents for which suicide is just a subset that confront the transportation industry and the MTA, and present many of the same costs to the communities involved that I just described for suicide. This slide illustrates the increase in injuries and deaths on railroad properties across the United States. While statistics on transit properties are not readily available, collectively the transportation industry, to include our federal and state regulatory agencies, recognize the costs stemming from trespassing and suicide and are applying resources towards addressing these issues, such as our resident in the National Operation Lifesaver program. Unfortunately, there are no easy or sure solutions to prevent trespassing, and in particular, suicide attempts. That said, the costs just described are unacceptably high and drive the MTA to act. At the MTA headquarters, multiple programs were initiated this last year to provide tools for our employees to better take care of themselves, to identify those needing assistance, and to provide information as to where professional assistance can be secured. Of note, MTA continues to a marketing campaign. Here we use our electronic billboard system to provide information to employees and customers on who to contact if either they are emotionally distressed or they observe someone who appears to be suffering. We have also rolled out a mental first aid training program. This program provides MTA employees with skills to more readily identify individuals who are suffering at home, in their community, among their fellow employees, and in the workplace. This training further provides appropriate intervention techniques and information on where to direct distressed individuals for professional help. Lastly, it is recognized that physical health directly impacts our mental health. Therefore, we're rolling out Healthy Mondays initiative, which provides ideas to the workforce on activities that will improve their physical and mental well-being. So if there are no questions at this point, we'll go to the agency reports. Lori, please. Long Island Railroad.
Good morning. So I want to start by touching on some of the trends. Going to the first batch of safety statistics, our customer accidents and employee lost time injury accidents continue to plateau. We have launched a new enterprise safety system, so we're collecting a lot more data points than we have in the past, and we're looking forward to leveraging that to be more strategic in our decision making about where to focus our efforts. As our public speaker alluded to, Long Island is also struggling with the assault of our employees. Those are increasing. We find that the interaction that seems to trigger this type of abuse, for lack of a better word, of our employees are fare disputes. And as this gentleman alluded to in the public speaking session, spitting is the #1 reaction that our customers are inflicting on our employees. And I use those words, inflicting and purposefully. Our employees are very professional, they're very dedicated, and we continue to work with the MTA police, we continue to work with labor to help with training our employees, with providing support to our employees, and we are looking forward to the deployment of the increased MTA police to hopefully help us to combat, by having that presence on the system, combat that type of behavior, because it is unacceptable. So we continue to look at that and remain very much concerned about that. Continuing on with our safety statistics, I think it's also important to note, and on grade crossing accidents, we kind of put it at a plateau, but it is important to note that it has gone down significantly if you look at the 3-year cycle. We attribute that very much to our focus on grade crossings and trains on the tracks, because don't forget, by implementing those delineators and the Waze solution and leveraging that technology, we believe that increased focus on grade crossings has truly benefited us across the system. Moving on to suicide statistics, again, we do tragically have folks that do commit suicide using our system. We do have, as a member of the community, we take very seriously this public health crisis. And with that stated, we have implemented a number of suicide prevention efforts. So new for us, we are installing blue lights at our stations as stations become rehabilitated and undergo renovation. This is a pilot program that we've implemented based on what we've seen internationally in other countries, Japan and the UK, that they have seen some benefit from implementing the blue lights on their platforms and in their stations. We are also reinvigorating our suicide prevention efforts by implementing newly designed signs, and those are all being installed at our stations, referencing our ongoing partnership with the Long Island Suicide Prevention Coalition Response and Long Island Crisis Center. So we contract locally with these providers for this dedicated hotline. So when somebody is in our system and they believe that they need assistance, this hotline takes them directly to trained counselors that can provide them with support and references. We also continue to focus on our high security fencing to be able to harden our system. And we are building on the success that Metro North has experienced by leveraging their QPR training. So thank you, Justin and Metro North. So all of our ambassadors and ticket clerks will start to be trained at the end of this month. The focus of the training to be able to give them the skills and heighten their awareness so that they can intervene, because research shows that sometimes somebody that's intent on committing harm to themselves, a simple interaction, whether it's a smile or a conversation with somebody, may help to break that moment that they're in, the despair that they're feeling. So we're looking forward to the benefits of that training. Moving on, I know one of the things that we've been focusing heavily on are the differences between Metro North and Long Island Railroad when it comes to customer injuries. Justin and I continue to have conversations about our systems, and while we're continuing to leverage best practices and strategies, we thought it was important to look at it a little quantitatively as well. So you'll see the question had been, well, what would the rate be if we didn't factor Penn Station in? Penn Station accounts for the largest portion of injuries for the Long Island Railroad. Just looking at the time period for 2019, we had 71 customer injuries at Penn Station. The next closest station is Jamaica. And that Jamaica we had 9. So there's a stark contrast, and if we look across our system, between what the experience is in Penn Station versus the rest of our system. We believe a lot of that is attributed to the physical plant that exists in Penn Station. It's starkly different from Grand Central, and I think as I've alluded to before, under Governor Cuomo's leadership, Penn Station is being transformed, and we've already seen the benefit on the West End Concourse. We're not experiencing these types of events on the West End Concourse. It's open, it's well lit, and we're looking forward to the benefits of a transformed Penn Station to help us in this area. In addition to the customer flow, to get down to your platform, and I say down, is very different than Grand Central. Grand Central, you're walking on a level onto the platform, onto your train. One of the areas that we experience the biggest challenges is on our stairs and our escalators. You have this hundreds of folks that once their train is posted, which unfortunately is because of the complexity of the system there, usually less than 10 minutes before it's scheduled to depart, we have hundreds of people funneling now into these stairs and these escalators to go down to the platform to get to the train. And that's where we see the biggest challenge. So from a qualitative perspective, the experience at Penn Station is very different for our customers than at Grand Central Terminal. I think the other dynamic that we've noted also is that, so we're a FRA reporting entity, so we have certain criteria that we have to report on based on the conditions set out in the regulation. Justin and Metro North have a fire brigade at Grand Central Terminal, so they're able to determine in a much better fashion than we are when a customer is seeking medical attention, whether or not it is going to result in a reportable injury. For many of our incidents at Penn Station, our reports are through the MTA police, and somebody goes away in an ambulance, we have to assume that they're getting more than first aid in their treatment. So we have to report those, even though they may not, one, be our customers, and two, actually be resulting in more than first aid. So there's the qualitative aspect of it, and then there's the challenge of how we get reports and what happens at Penn Station. But with that said, in addition to the transformation of Penn Station, we do work very closely with Amtrak and with New Jersey Transit, because they experience a lot of the same challenges we do from a physical plant perspective. So even as example, when we had these service changes with the state of good repair for Amtrak, we partnered with New Jersey Transit and with Amtrak to do assessments of how customer flow is going and making those adjustments. So we work very closely in partnership with the other agencies at Penn Station to try to mitigate some of the challenges and hazards that our customers may encounter. Moving to the next slide, you'll see from an industry perspective, Justin, I also wanted to touch on comparatively how our agencies are doing to the other commuter railroads in the Northeast. So you'll see from a ridership perspective, Long Island leads the pack with 91 million plus riders. And the low end of the spectrum, you have MBTA with 32 million. As far as rates go, again, you see the ranges on the very low end of the spectrum, Metro North at less than 1 actually, and the other agencies accordingly. So no, I'm going to turn it over to Justin to see if he has anything he wants to add as well.
So I think Lori touched on a lot of it, but just a couple other items to point out is, as Lori mentioned, we have the fire brigade. So the fire brigade responds to all employee and customer injuries. So they're the first responder. They're there before the paramedics, before the ambulance. So we have a very good handle on what's going on with the individual that's injured. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have the big boards at Grand Central Terminal. All the trains are on the boards 30 minutes prior to departure. So there's really not a guessing game when you're boarding our trains where the train's going to come in or what track it's going to come in on. Our customers know. The other piece of it is at the gate boards, it's on the board 20 minutes prior to departure. And for the most part, our trains come in and leave off the same track pretty much every day, or to the extent possible. And when they can't, they're essentially in the same vicinity. So it's not as if our customers are running all over the terminal trying to figure out where to go. They have a general idea of where they need to go each and every day. So those are some of the differences and similarities between us and some of the reasons for our metrics to be the way they are. So if there's any questions on that.
Yeah,
I'm watching these slides, and the comparison between Grand Central and Penn is apples and oranges. One is a terminal station, the other is a through station. One has just Metro North customers, the other has 3 different companies utilizing it. So it's really apples and oranges.
Can I ask this? If we could go back to that slide that shows the comparison of the Grand Central. Good. So the raw numbers are how many at Penn Station was 70 something, and how many at Grand Central?
31.
So I'm just wondering, it's often useful to have, and maybe you've already done it, some granularity of what they are. So how many are slips and falls, how many are in escalators, how many are on steps, those types of things. I think if we could take a look at those, it might also help point us in some good direction.
I use Penn Station, the New Jersey Transit side, and I agree with all the comments that you've made. A great deal of the injuries come from trying to run down to get your train. At the board meeting, I'll be moving a study that Jano's conducting, which is primarily oriented to getting movement, to figuring out how to move people through the station, and especially the up and down portion. I really think that if you have the granularity, that would help expand his study into the right place. So I think things are coming together here, and it's good to see. I also think that the fire brigade is, I realize you have some institutional issues at Penn Station, but I've also seen that when there's an issue, the organizations do come together and work together. So don't take that off the table. It's possible to do it. It's just a little more challenging.
Commissioner Tessitore, Commissioner Brown.
So I'd like to circle back a little bit to what I consider the most important stat of the morning, and that's the employee assaults. I've talked about it in the past. The fact that the numbers are going up should be a tremendous concern to us, and I think we need to take a real good look at what we've done since we've all agreed that this is unacceptable in past meetings, because I know we're taking steps and issues involving training and how to try to educate employees to deal with the public. But if I may, I'm a conductor by trade. I've been involved in a few scuffles in my 25 years. I've been spit on, and there's nothing worse than being spit on. I would rather get punched than be spit on, to be quite honest with you. And the law is the law, and how these incidents of extreme harassment are played out in the field become very concerning for our employees, because unless you're taken off a train or leave a train with a physical injury, those hidden scars that the speaker had talked about this morning sometimes go unnoticed. And sometimes you'll get, calls in the field, you better check on Joe. He had that incident 2 days ago. He's back to work, you realize that, and he's walking around in a fog because he was engaged in a fare dispute that is humiliating and oftentimes. At a time where we're more concerned about fare evasion than we've ever been in my career on this property, throughout all 3 agencies. We're motivating people of the importance of fare collection. They're going out there and doing their job. They're dealing with different forms of technology that are creating new challenges that we've never really prepped before regarding e-tickets and scanning and identifying new and improved scams from ridership that are creating fare disputes from both honest commuters and dishonest commuters. So we have to do something. We have to take action to do something, because it's very hard to continually motivate employees to be diligent on the front lines to collect fares, because that money is so important, when the statistics of the battles that they're dealing with on the trains and in the system are elevating. So even in this category, the person that goes back to work in a day or two, we offer them employee assistance. We send them to the employee assistance program, where if they're fortunate, the employee assistance program will cover them and allow them to go sick for a few days, to go talk to somebody. So now they're using their own sick time to deal with a little bit of a traumatic incident that maybe we need to treat differently. Because in my opinion, that becomes an on-the-job injury when you're humiliated or extremely harassed or spit on in the public. So if we want our frontline crews to be there for the riders because they're dedicated to do so, they're dedicated to collect fares, they're dedicated to be visible, they're dedicated to provide a safe environment for our riders, we got to be there for them, and we have to show them that there's support in the field for them. The MTA police are coming, we understand. We have to incorporate the police officers onto the trains and into the system, including the commuter rails and the transit system, and let the commuters start to understand that this is unacceptable. Too often, they're even allowed to remain on the trains that there is an altercation on because of the law. Their hands are tied. There's no blame to the police department here. We work well with them and we love them for what they do. But at the same token, they have to have the tools to be able to support us better out in the field. And I hope this just isn't another attempt at me just saying, this is unacceptable and we have to stop it. We have to do something to stop it.
Bobby, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that because no one knows this better than New York City Transit with the amount of assaults that we actually get day in and day out. One of the issues that we've seen is that spitting, and I agree with you on that. I'd rather be punched than spit at, absolutely, 100%. Harassment is a violation. It has to occur inside an officer's presence for anything to be done or even investigated. We now have a legislative recourse that we're dealing with through law of putting in legislature to get harassment upgraded to a misdemeanor, which makes it a crime, not a violation. So this way, at least we can pursue it a lot further than what we could do to begin with. It's a horrendous thing. We also have a second piece of legislature that's in to add additional titles to the Assault 2 package. And what that means is that if you look inside the penal law, Assault 2 takes in many of the categories of employees that we have. Some employees are not in there, and we're putting in to get everyone covered. And I think that's very important, but I agree with you.
Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Lynn.
Well, the longer the wait, the more you got to say. But the in reference to what Bob was saying there about the legislation, that was going to be my point. Is the police need to be armed not only with whatever they're armed with, mostly psychological skills, but they also need to be armed with legislation to back up the severity of these behaviors. In that regard, one of our organization is trying to push legislation themselves, and I'd love you to coordinate with them and see if you can work on it. Won't
sure, absolutely.
Get in each other's
Anybody
way.
has anything with this, please contact me. I would gladly be the point person on this because I feel that it's important. It has to be done.
Now back to the points I wanted to make 10 minutes ago. But the first of all, with regard to the fire brigade at Metro North, it's I'd say it's one of our most enthusiastic groups of people. Kathy will probably back me up on that. I don't know. I overstate my position quite often, but they are the people that are on that group. They love it. They love being. They concentrate a lot on first aid stuff and talk about first responders. Boom, they're there. They've also been a great source of leadership for the union, and quite a few of the people that were on there have been migrated into management positions. And there's quite a few managers participating as well. It's sort of a Dunkirk thing. We're all in this together. And in that regard, then I'd like to pivot to Penn Station, and as we look at and contrast the two situations, we have members on both properties, and we have members in Jersey Transit and Amtrak as well. But the main element here we got to focus on things we can do, and the thing about Metro North is we have control over what we do. So when we want to create a fire brigade, we put together the systems and the personnel and the call for volunteers and train them, and we control the whole entire process. Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong again. But on Penn Station, it's simply not that. And in the fire brigade, the absence of that sort of thing is really more. Of course, you work with Jersey Transit and Amtrak. You have little choice but to work with Jersey Transit and Amtrak. They're customers are getting off of their train, getting onto yours. They're the ones that are falling down in the corridor. You know, it's a giant mess, authority mess. I'm surprised the statistics aren't even worse. I mean, when you go to the shock of Penn Station relative to Grand Central's, you know, hits your body and your brain at the same time. But perhaps I mean, you can only, working together is a function of working together. You know, we all do better when we all do better. And if Amtrak and Jersey Transit were to work with you on creating a fire brigade there, you know, I know it would, you know, you'd have to balance out your authority stuff, and all that takes expense too. And I was going to query you as to how much of the statistical difference was a function of administrative friction between the different institutions, but it's not a relevant question. I mean, I'm specialized in irrelevant questions, but my point is, though, that doing a fire brigade or a emergency volunteer, whatever you want to call it there, with those people would allow all of your organizations to funnel your activities through the same group, and that would be my preference for a improvement in the situation.
So I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I think also the nexus between fare evasion and employee safety is one that we haven't discussed, and is obviously an important one. I'm wondering whether we ought to use the model of the TWU labor agreement, which talks about having a fare evasion committee, labor management committee, and I'm wondering whether there shouldn't be an interdisciplinary committee that involves both Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and the TWU Transit, and has a labor management group. Now, this is often difficult because you get hundreds of people coming to a meeting. Is there a possibility of having a group of a dozen people, something like that, that can sit and continue this conversation in a labor management forum, and coming up with employee worker suggestions along with management suggestions, and really move this forward on an MTA basis. But I think this is a perfect problem for a labor management collaboration. The interests coalesce of the groups, and we ought to be getting the input and continuing this conversation on a regular basis. So I don't know if there's a role I could play in it to be part of it. I'd be happy to be involved, but I do think this is perfect for that type of continued conversation.
Okay, thanks. Justin, you want to continue?
Yes, sir. All right. As discussed at Tuesday's committee meeting, both customer and employee injuries continue to trend down and outperform the previous time period. Customer injuries are down nearly 17%, and employee injuries are down by 13%. We also had an increase in employee assaults, up by 1 incident from 8 to 9, and we continue to work with MTA PD to help address these incidents. We also have we just recently started a meeting between labor, management, and the MTA PD to start looking at these incidents and figure out what's actually going on, because a lot of them are fare disputes, and a lot of them are actually physical assaults on our property more so than spitting, but we do have a few spitting events as well. There were no mainline derailments or collisions in this most recent time period, and grade crossing incidents were unchanged. However, we did have one recently, which took place Tuesday evening in Sloatsburg, New York on the Port Jervis line. Train 55 struck a tractor trailer at Washington Avenue shortly after 6 p.m. The tractor trailer was stuck on the grade crossing attempting to make a right turn onto the approach at New York Route 17. As the driver was attempting to get the tractor trailer off the grade crossing, train 55 struck the trailer. There were no injuries as a result of this incident. For trespasser injuries not involving a train, we experienced an increase from 7 to 10, and for trespasser injuries involving a train was unchanged at 14. Yes, ma'am.
I was actually on 55 on Tuesday, and I'd like to congratulate everybody who was involved in getting people off the train. It was a minor incident compared to what a train wreck usually is, completely without any kind of injuries, and our engine took some damage, but not as significantly as you would expect, not so for the truck. But I have to say that Metro North, the crew was New Jersey Transit. Metro North was on the scene. MTA police were on the scene very, very quickly. The announcements were good. We knew what was happening. The passengers were very polite to each other. Some were confused and stressed. Everybody wanted to get home. Actually, the coach bus service, which runs on the road parallel to the track, stopped and took some of our passengers on board and took us to Tuxedo and Harriman. And New Jersey Transit buses took us from Harriman to wherever we needed to go to our home station. So all in all, I don't want to repeat the experience, but it was very interesting and good to see everybody come together and work to help people who were stranded. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question raised by Commissioner Brown. If there's a slip or fall on a stairway in Penn Station, is that attributed to the track that it's on as to which railroad that's considered a slip or fall on? 1 through 7, is it a New Jersey Transit fall, or is it just whatever train happens to be serving that stairway at that time?
So the location and the owner and who maintains the physical plant does make a difference in reporting responsibility. The fact that there are customers does make it primarily our responsibility, but we're actually exploring that dynamic now.
I mean, it's not Long Island's responsibility if it's a track that Amtrak normally uses, and it was an Amtrak train that people were going to or coming from, correct?
So, I'm sorry, so
My question is, does the track that the slip or fall, the stairway leading to the track,
the assumption of who the customer is what starts the conversation about reportability and responsibility.
No matter which track it is?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. So of the 14 incidents we experienced from December 2018 to November 2019, 6 were confirmed suicides, 2 were confirmed suicide attempts, and there were 2 incidents reported as accidents. 1 was undetermined, and 3 still remain under investigation. So of those 14, 13 were male and 1 was female, and the incidents were split between the Harlem and New Haven lines at 6 each, with 2 on the Hudson. And the majority of the incidents took place between 3 and 9 p.m. and took place in the fourth quarter. So moving on to some of the initiatives that we're focused on to address this. So first, as part of our TRACS program, we partnered with the National Suicide Lifeline to provide individuals within our service territory a toll-free number for them to call. This information is displayed on board our trains and on station platforms. The poster on the screen is an example of our most recent campaign. As part of the new campaign, we also included the Crisis Text Line. This is a partnership we began in April of last year. The Crisis Text Line is a free text messaging service with 24/7 support for those in a mental health crisis. We work with the Crisis Text Line to develop a unique keyword and effective messaging for the campaign. So anyone experiencing a mental health crisis on Metro North can text the keyword "next to you" to 741-741 and immediately connect with a trained counselor via text. In 2019, we had 13 contacts using this unique keyword, and 4 of those came in the month of December. So given that a large portion of our society actually prefers text messaging than actually speaking to someone, this partnership was extremely important for us. And in March of last year, we also rolled out Question, Persuade, Refer, QPR training to teach employees how to recognize the warning signs of someone experiencing a mental health crisis or suicide crisis, and how to get them the assistance they need. The training was first rolled out to frontline employees and is currently being expanded to include all employees this year. In 2019, the Office of System Safety trained over 450 employees in QPR. And as part of National Suicide Prevention Month in September, our TRACS program partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and participated at 4 local Out for Darkness walks throughout New York and Connecticut. Metro North employees, family members, and friends joined our team and participated in the walks to support suicide prevention and awareness. This marks the 2nd year that Metro North participated in this event. And finally, we are also reviewing the feasibility of piloting anti-trespass guard panels on our property. These are widely used in Europe as an additional safety measure to prevent pedestrians from trespassing onto right-of-ways, and we're currently taking a look to see if it's going to work for us. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Justin. Peter, let's do construction development. Use another one. Use the one next to you.
Good morning. So MTACC's had 4 major projects in its works in 2019, which represented roughly 55.5 million hours and approximately 2,700 contractor workers. We have experienced a slight uptick in our lost time injury. This mainly due to change of operations, constraint of space, and material supply logistics. We continue to work with our contractors addressing lagging indicators, conversion to leading indicators. The statistics that are in the book are portraying what our major focus for the initiatives that we are taking, and we have a strategy going for 2020 to continue this process going forward. That concludes my presentation. Any
Thanks,
question?
Peter. Okay, bridges and tunnels. Eric, please.
So good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to report that B&T performance indicators continue to show a decrease in collision as well as collision with injury, with an increase of traffic to over 900,000 crossings per day. Employee injuries have also decreased. Lost time injuries have decreased within this reporting time, decreasing to approximately 35%. So this is all positive news. If we can, next slide, we can go. So I'll talk about the significance of this slide in a minute, but overall, as far as suicides occur within our system, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge has the highest incidence of suicides. And this is consistent throughout a 10-year period. So next slide, Pat. So over the past several months, we've been taking a fresh look at our suicide prevention strategies by partnering with Columbia University and New York City Department of Health to assess our facilities and review the communication presented to our customers. We conducted joint assessments consisting of visiting each of our facilities to review infrastructure, look at the signage, positioning of the signage, and the call boxes that connect to New York City well and mental health professionals to try to determine any advantage that we may gain by using these behavioral specialists, looking at this truly from a multidisciplinary approach. Next slide, Pat. Go back to the previous slide. This wasn't changed. Something was supposed to be changed. Apologize. As a result of the feedback that we received from this joint assessment, we changed our signage, our messaging from "Life is worth living" to "Having trouble, don't struggle alone." The signage that we provide provides a number to New York City Well, just in case that there's anybody that feels the need, that they're on the fence of having suicidal thoughts or tendencies, they can call this particular helpline and receive some intervention that hopefully will prevent them for what they're thinking about doing. We're also awaiting authorization to use a national 899 number. The federal government has recognized that there's been over a 30% increase in suicides over the past 10 years, and one of the responses to this is a communication medium where, similar to 911, where there's a crisis and you call 911 for first responder intervention, the same concept is going to be provided to the general public using this 899 number. My understanding, discussions are occurring at the FCC as we speak, and I'm working with my contact at the Columbia University to find out when we can actually implement this. We think that this is a good service that would serve the needs of our customers as they're going through our facilities. We also worked into the conversation with this joint assessment team the importance of our enforcement, our law enforcement personnel. Our law enforcement personnel are connected to the systems that are on the bridge. So if any of the call boxes are activated, if in the event they use the New York City well number and the individual on the phone provides a location to where they are, and if they're on our facility, we can, our surveillance assets as well as our command center get activated, and we can go to the location that the individual is, and we can provide intervention at time for that individual at that time. We recently had a successful event where we're on the RFK, the system worked perfectly, the individual saw the sign, the individual activated the call box, the command center was made aware of what was happening, we were able to dispatch personnel, and as a result an intervention was made, and we believe that that person's life was saved as a result of it. So getting back to the significance of the Verrazano, one of the points that was made by this joint assessment team was that physical barriers are a primary prevention, at least when it comes to bridges. Something that I've learned about the behavioral characteristics of those that are choosing a bridge to commit suicide, there is an absolute fixation to that asset. So if an individual is focused on the iconic structure of the Verrazano to end their life, that asset is very important in that individual's planning of ending that individual's life. The concept being is that if there's a physical barrier in place that prevents that individual from accessing a drop point to an area below, that individual does not seek another media or method to commit suicide. So method substitution doesn't necessarily fall in line here. What I'm trying to say simply is there's a notion that if I put a barrier up on the Verrazano, well, they're only going to go to the Throgs Neck. Data indicates otherwise. So what's occurring at the Verrazano, we've installed 2 prototype fences on the upper and lower level. We're studying these prototype fences to see how they impact operational activity, both from a maintenance perspective and a first responder perspective. We're going to get feedback from both of those functions to see if there are any changes that need to occur from an operational standpoint. And once we receive that feedback, we're expecting to go forward with construction by the end of this year. So I truly believe that this is going to be a major preventative initiative for bridges and tunnels to have a barrier in place that would prevent access to those drop points. And as a result, we should be looking at this and evaluating this in the next couple of years, and we should see if data is consistent from what's happening on other bridges, lives will be saved as a result of it.
Thanks, Eric. Anybody have any questions? All right, let's go to Transit.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'll start off first with our statistics. As you can see, I'm really going to touch on the ones that we've seen a rise in. The first one we see is regional bus customer accidents, okay, which is up roughly about 13%. Based upon this, we're doing undercover rides, employee posters, and training. What we are finding is that the I guess you would say the driving factor here a lot of times is what's known as thrown by movement. With the advent of bike lanes and different type roadway setups, bus operators are challenged by people coming in front of them, dodging out in front of them, and they have to try to address that. So that's what's really driving up that number. The Department of Buses is doing a campaign as far as making bus operators aware of this, and we're starting to see the number tick down, so that's important. The next one is employee lost time injuries. We're doing employee awareness, and again, a poster campaign again. The biggest driver in this is assaults and overexertions, and we touched on assaults a little bit with that. The next one, as far as our derailments, we have a little uptick in yard derailment, which is really a focus on housekeeping and making sure that the yard environment is better suited. If you go down to regional bus collisions, that's up slightly. It's up like 0.2%. We're dealing with collision warning systems, pedestrian turn warnings, and undercover rides, again, to try to address it. When you get down to reported trespassing, and I kind of lump that in with contact with train also, we're looking for customer awareness, trying to make sure people understand that they shouldn't be on the tracks. That's the first thing, especially with trespass. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that a contributing factor here is probably homeless population looking to try to sleep somewhere or trying to squirrel themselves away. Contact with trains, interesting statistic is that 34% of our CWIs are actually on the platform itself. And there's another 25% that is actually struck within the confines of the station. So they're kind of related with the trespass a little bit, but some of these ones that are on the platform, we actually have people that walk into the train, which is kind of amazing, and that could maybe be attributed to maybe having a little bit too much good cheer. All right. Assaults on employees, we talked about. I think we're in total agreement with that. I mean, bus barriers have been a help. Video is definitely a help as far as a prosecution tool, going after people that have done these assaults. And I think what's really important is the vigorous prosecution of people who do these assaults. I give kudos to Craig and Andy, who actually showed up at, I think, at least 2 or 3 times at criminal court to, vocalize how important it is that these people are prosecuted for injuring our employees, and I think that's very important. Moving on to suicide statistics. As you can see, our total contact with train fatalities is actually down. Our number of alleged suicides, which is completed, is down, but our number of attempted suicides is actually up by 24. I'm sorry, it's 24 for 2019. If you go to the next slide, you see suicide prevention efforts that we're trying to utilize is intervention of signage, which is posted at all underground stations. We're partnering with New York City Well, and we're participating on the MTA Safety Management's Office-sponsored agency-wide suicide prevention work group. All right, we can go to the next slide. Here's something that we do want to bring up is the actual change of us going from a system safety program plan to an agency safety plan. 49 CFR Part 73, which is the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, replaces what's known as the SSPP. Part 673 requires a Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan that must be brought from the actual entity. If you go to the next slide, I'm sorry. Okay, the ASP documents the process and procedures for New York City Transit Safety Management System, SMS, based on a safety program that's detailing what was known as the 4 pillars: safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. There are 21 elements of the SSPP that is now going to be brought into 8 elements or 8 sections of an ASP. A little bit of streamlining, the same information, but streamlining it a little bit down. So there's some basic ASP requirements. It's got to be approved by the New York City Accountable Executive and Board of Directors, reviewed and updated and approved annually. Designate a New York City Transit Chief Safety Officer. Document the New York City Transit SMS process and describe New York City Transit employee safety reporting programs. So, the status of the actual transition. New York City Transit is transitioning from system safety program plans to an ASP for Department of Subways and Department of Buses. There will actually be 2 ASPs. The board will receive the PT ASPs for review prior to the April Safety Committee meeting. We're going to get that to you as quick as possible. New York City Transit will request the board PT-ASP approval at the April Safety Committee meeting for submission to the PTSB, which in turn goes through the FTA. Any questions?
On your yard and mainline
Yeah.
derailment statistics, have you ever broken that down by car class?
You know, I believe it's there, but I don't think we actually did like a running total of it. A lot of times what we're finding to be, especially with yard derailments, it is the maintenance in the yards. But trains are traveling at a much slower speed.
Right.
So the maintenance is not as, I guess, as heavy
Maintenance
as we
of
do
track?
of track, just to make sure, because sometimes we had one derailment where track had actually separated slightly, and that caused it. We've also had sometimes an operator will take a train, go over a switch that should have been thrown, back up, and then derail also. So there are little things that we look at. Some of it is training issue, and some of it is yard maintenance. But I'll take a look at that for you, and I'll actually get back to you on
Thank you
that.
so much.
You're welcome.
Sir?
Can I make a recommendation that, being that this is the safety committee, can we move portions of the issues dealing with assaults to the agencies to deal with concerning fare collection policies and procedures and field reports, now that we're identifying that a lot of it is all geared towards fare evasion? Can we move that to the committees, and maybe the chairs of the committees can take on a little bit to deal with the policies and procedures, and also employee support after the incidents, making sure that we monitor and keep track of how we're following up with employees that fall in those in-between situations of assaults and harassment and things of that nature. Because, this committee is perfect for what it's doing, but if it's policies and procedures, I think that has to move somewhere else.
Okay, well, I'll take that note, and clearly there's a whole policing kind of security function here that needs to be looked at. Right? Are there any other questions? Can I ask one of the board members to adjourn this meeting? Okay. All right, it's over. Thank you.